Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to Spiritually Empowered Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. How about we share a deep breath and think the word release. Beautiful. Okay, so very special human today that I get to interview. My good friend Mike, he is an epic soul, a powerful masculine presence, a voice of healing, just overall, and specifically with men's mental health. So I'm really, really honored to have him on today. And he is a licensed master social worker and a licensed chemical dependency counselor based in Austin, Texas. He uses solution-focused brief therapy and attachment theory principles to inspire transformation in the lives of men that he works with. He founded Seer Men's Counseling in 2021 to help men live emotionally liberated lives by exploring meaning and purpose in individual and group counseling. Wow. Beautiful, beautiful. Mike, thank you so much for being with us today. How are you right now?
Life is good. I'm so glad to see you, Ashley. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for being here. A question I love to start with is, what does being in your spiritual power feel like and look like for you right now? Just drop that one in on you. On point.
Oh, my spiritual power, being in that right now, looked like me getting in bed around 7 p.m. yesterday. And I'm starting the Lord of the Rings series.
Sweet.
My spiritual power right now is based off of resting because the past like 4, 5 weekends in a row, I've been just traveling all over. And my tank is very low. So I am regenerating my spiritual power right now. And yeah, and that took me a long time to have some awareness about that, but two, to like deal with the, obvious like guilt, shame of like, I should just do. So yeah, I'm enjoying, like, I went to the park earlier after work. Probably gonna get back in bed after this, do a little reading. I'm not gonna do anything this long Memorial Day weekend. That's my spiritual power right there, baby.
Love that. Love that. Presence. Presence.
Chilling.
Beautiful. That reminds me of, and I don't know if you're somebody, Mike, who, I mean, you've experienced shamanic healing and you've journeyed in your own way to these other dimensions. You're Virgo, so you're Earth, you're an Earth person, yet I feel like you've done your fair share of exploring in other realms. And something that I've recently been thinking about is, what is journeying to other realms do? What's the point if we don't come back and enjoy our lives today?
It's a great question. I heard on a podcast a bit ago about, as someone who's experimented, explored, journeyed with psychedelics, like I'm all for, you know, those experiences. I love that the FDA and places like Johns Hopkins, NYU, University of Texas are starting to explore these things in a therapeutic setting. I'm all about that. Would love to, be there as a client and a clinician at some point. And I think what you're getting at is like, if it's not integrated, like if it's just this one little experience, but it's not integrated into the fabric of our life, like, what are we doing? What's the point?
Absolutely. Beautiful. Yeah. It's like the heroine's journey, the heroine's journey. It's about, making the return. We go out and
There it is.
we meet the fire and we, have whatever experience we have. And then at some point we make the return and share our gifts and go to sleep at, 7:30 and just living, and you could say free of suffering, right? Because all these journeys, hopefully they're liberating us on some level so we can return to these present moment lives. This is precious, and feel alive without that weight on our chest. Yeah.
No doubt.
Love that. Love that. So on that note, what do you do, Mike, when you hear, or have those voices in you sort of gone away or volume turned down in regards to resting without a level of shame and guilt? How do you navigate those thoughts?
Like when I do feel guilty for not getting up at X time, or yeah, just because I can objectively say that usually my best days do start early in the morning with a workout, with journaling, with doing some kind of deep work of like, how can I rack up some wins in the morning? I'm going to take a cold shower. I'm going to do my athletic greens, right? Like, I am a Virgo. Like, I love my nice little structure. I want to just live in there. That's why traveling the past 5 weeks has been so discombobulating. So I know that objectively, like, that's a great thing for me. My little structure, my little system is great. And there's also times where I cannot do that. Like right now, you know, like, and it's really hard. And I think it's obviously something I'm still working on, and it's taking me a long time to not immediately get out the hammer and start beating myself of, I should be able to, like, day in, day out, and I think there is a corner of the men's self-help, men's, you know, hustle culture movement that is really prevalent of like, and I think there's some good points there, right? Like when I think of people like Jocko Willink, like Navy SEALs, or, David Goggins, and I listen to a lot of their content, there is this sense of like, no matter what, you're going to deliver, you're going to be able to do it, right?
Certainty.
Certainty, control, you know. And I think there's a part of myself that really subscribes to that. And there's certainly been periods in my life where I am going to Navy SEAL my life into a better place. And that's been beneficial. I think it's a net positive. And I think what has been healthier for me is also giving myself some grace. And I think that's the more spiritual side of ourselves, because we are not machines. We are not automatons that can just crank out, 20-hour days and 40 miles a week running and whatever, regimentation system structure you have in your life. There's going to be days when it's best to not do that, right? And that's why, I mean, that's very much been a part of my journey over the past 10 years, like wanting to just like bam, bam, like hit it so hard, wanting to be great, wanting to prove myself, climb ladders. And also that led me to a absolute spiritual abyss in my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now when those voices do come, I at least have some awareness, like, I can objectively say, like, it's okay. It's just one day. Like, I can always get back at it tomorrow. But today, like, I know my value, my worth isn't dependent upon me working that routine. That routine is supposed to work for me. I don't work for the routine.
Yeah. Yeah. That's incredible. It's like you're not shaming that voice. You're not like bad, bad, wrong, wrong. What I will teach people is that when we shame or judge, we hook ourselves to whatever we just shamed or judged. And so you sounded very soft in a responsive way. Just what I heard was like, yeah, okay, well, I can do that another time. It felt very gentle and responsive versus shaming and knowing all over that thought.
Sure, because when we think about like where that voice comes from, I think a lot of depth psychologists would ascribe that to like your shadow, like, or another way of looking at it is this like unloved, wounded child or person or spirit in you. And for my money, you just be like, yeah, it's okay. It's like, how would you parent yourself? Like being an adult is reparenting yourself. You got to figure out what you didn't get, what you need right now, and how to give that to yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I have found that sometimes those voices can be a little panicky. It can be like a life or death situation. When,
Hmm.
and that I feel like is part of the shadow or part of the inner child, is like that life and death feeling in something that is not life and death, right?
Mm.
It's like that primal part of the brain that's like, if you don't, like, I used to hear this voice, like, if, move this crystal or like you're gonna die. Like literally. Like, I'm no shame. Like I would hear these,
Yeah.
shamanism would say thoughts are spirits, and that was a spirit of fear or a spirit of, there's different technologies and languages and different ways to view these things. But we don't, essentially what shamanism says is you don't have to drink the poison of those thoughts. You can release them. And it's not about I
Mm.
hate you, I release you. It's about I love you, I release you.
Yeah. Amen. That's the gospel.
Liberation. Yes, from moment to
It
moment,
is.
putting it into our lives, right? Love it.
Yeah.
Whoa, this knocked my tea over, but I did not. So we are good. Okay. So bring us back, Mike. I've known you since high school, and I remember that you won. Didn't you win Mr. Deep Run?
Well, this is a core wound. I didn't win.
Oh shit! You won. Come on now, like you brought that.
I think, yes.
So
In my
you're
heart of hearts, I won.
so you're
No,
also,
but I did give it my best.
yes, I remember. I remember. Yeah. So I've known you since high school.
Yes.
And you did your sports, right? And your music, and you seemed very
Hmm.
social and all of these things. What was happening for you during those years? Take us back to Mike and
Holy shit.
lessons.
How long you got? Oh,
Right.
man. Well,
Really, yeah. What was impacting you at that time, and how did that lead you to your mission?
oh boy. What was happening with sweet young Michael at that point? In a nutshell, in a nutshell, I was a severely wounded person, and I unleashed that on anyone that I could be wounded by. I preemptively lashed out at them in order to not be hurt. This most happened in female relationships, but certainly with guys that were in what we might call, rival factions of friends. I think looking back at that time, you know, I was given a very unhealthy picture of manhood, and my dad at that time he's also a really wounded guy just from what he had gone through as a kid. And he was a really stressed out dude. Like he had had a marriage fail when I was a young person. He was working his ass off to take care of us and doing all this stuff on the side. And he was in a lot of pain and he was really hurting and he didn't have a good outlet for that. Right. So, looking at like that's kind of the blueprint that I had in a lot of ways. Even though there were parts of that I was like, I don't subscribe to this. So I kind of went in my, own direction, which in some ways looked like isolating, thinking that I was hyper different, like on the Enneagram. Your listeners are aware I'm a type 4, which means I'm an individualist. And I think the main aspect of the 4 that's interesting is like I and we think we're like aliens compared to our parents. Like we don't I don't identify with being like my parents at all. And that was like my identity. My identity was not being my parents in high school, for example. So I was like really into music, like I was like into psychedelia and all these things. But when I think the most defining point of me as a young person was I'm just in a lot of pain and I don't know how to express this. I'm not sure what my options are for expressing it, so I'm just going to be a dickhead. And that's this persona that I created. Like, I'm going to be a piece of shit to women. Like, I'm going to, like hook up culture and all of these things. And I'm going to enact my wounds on other people. That's just short and sweet of it.
Absolutely. What changed for you?
Since high school,
Yeah, what
or
a moment that you decided to stop doing that? Because if, you could say that a lot of that sounds like, protection, very valid. I mean, very, you have this blueprint, you
yeah,
live the way that you need to survive, and you do what you need to do to not self explode, right? It's like in shamanism, we're like, we have these things called soul splits, which is to self-preserve. We split off and we live this halfway self. We're unoccupied in our fullness, which causes
yeah.
a lot of other, issues, but it's a way of self-preservation. So my question is, when did that mask come off and why? And maybe it wasn't one moment, but when did you realize that you didn't have to live that way?
Yeah, I think it's hard to kind of piece together, but if I could pinpoint it onto like a kind of an era of my life, it was probably like right after college. Because as you can imagine, going from that person in high school, I went into college and, you know, there was certainly some of that same behavior. I think over the 4 years, like I got somewhat healthier, but I still had toxic, intimate relationships. Like I basically dated this whole girl for the 4 years of college, off and on, of course, because it was fucking unhealthy. So we do like 6 or 8 month stretches of together, and then there'd be some kind of blow up, and we'd break up and reassemble. But I think the real some like aha come to Jesus moments, like I think it was really helpful for me to literally leave the country for like a year. So I went and taught in Spain that first year after school, and I just had a big removal. And that was like the okay. And I think that's the beauty of moving anywhere. It's like I don't have to be that guy. Like I don't have to I don't have to do these things. Like what do I want to do? Who do I want to be? But I think zeroing it in on it even more, there was this time because right when I came home from Spain, I was living out in Eugene, Oregon. And I was thinking about maybe going back to school at the University of Oregon to get my education degree. Like I thought I wanted to teach at that point. But I was still having these weird female relationships. And I think part of my healing was like being able to do some, I didn't think this, I wouldn't identify this in that way at the time, but basically like therapizing myself. Like I had this weird rundown with this one girl who was a music student at University of Oregon. We had gone out on a Saturday to go on a hike. It just happened to be Valentine's Day. And I was basically using this girl for, you know, just like the sex, right? As you can imagine, being 22 years old, like there was not a lot of depth to our relationship. And God bless this girl, like she bought me a book for Valentine's Day. I still have it. It's right by my toilet. It's The Soul of Rumi. It's a beautiful, book of poetry. And she got me this book. There was a lot of expectation coming from her about like, hey, like it's Valentine's Day. It's not Saturday, it's Valentine's Day. And I was not in a place to receive that. So I was just cunt about the whole day. I was like frustrated, moody, irritable, just grumpy. And leaving that experience, obviously she's like, what's going on? And I am not in a place with any kind of emotional intelligence to be able to communicate that at that point in my life. But I leave that experience and I go on a walk. And had heard of the Socratic method at some point in college. And I basically just started like therapizing myself on this walk. I'm like, what's going on here? Why am I doing this? What do I want? Do I want to continue having interactions like this? So I would say that was a huge part of kind of breaking this routine, this default programming. And I would also say, too, because at the time I was smoking a lot of weed. And that was my meds since high school, since like junior year of high school. It was pretty much at the point at that time, like I was smoking every day, if not multiple times a day. And at that point in Oregon, I'd been considering changing that relationship with weed for about a year or so. But that around that point, like I kind of just went cold turkey. I started going to some like AA or MA meetings. I was like, I don't know what's happening here, but I don't like it. Like I would like to put some distance between myself and this thing. And that was also a really interesting time of like, I need to stop relying on substances to change the way I feel, you know? Because looking back on that time and now as an addiction counselor or, recovery counselor, like, I don't know if I would have met DSM criteria for a substance use disorder or not. Like, it wasn't spiraling into, my life wasn't unmanageable, right? I was still going to work, like, things were well. I was just dependent. It was probably more substance dependence, right? But getting some space from weed, from alcohol for like a 6 to 8 month period, I think also kind of sparked some of this deeper introspection, that has happened in the past decade or so.
Yeah. Beautiful share. Yeah. I felt the pain in that, Mike, as a woman, I have to say, that using sexuality as perhaps another way to feel better or have a need met. I felt the pain in that
Oh yeah.
feminine being, on both ends though, right? Because that's your pain, and feel free to change what I'm saying here, but your pain and then project it onto a feminine being, like that's a cycle.
Yeah,
Hurts, right? Straight up.
for sure. And I think like this still lives in me deeply, but it's this need for approval, for belonging, for validation, from acceptance from women. Like that is my fucking drug. I love that, you know? And that, you know, like if we're looking at 16-year-old Mike, like that's his drug of choice.
Yeah. Yeah. And, beautiful. Oh, I honor you for sharing your truth. Like, thank you for that. That's a true leader, like straight up. Somebody is willing to sit in that truth. And as we speak something, with the shadow, I know you brought up shadow and I'm like, I can go all into that. It's something that I'm super into liberating our shamed aspects, right? Once we speak something, once we liberate, and I'm sure you could go off on this in terms of men's counseling. So please do.
Yeah.
What's hidden runs us, right? Talk to us about the shadow. And once we speak something and air something and feel something and say it, move it out of the body, it no longer lives in the shadow, because something that's in the shadow is something that's unknown. It's an unknown driver. So tell us your journey of, starting to bring space and consciousness into your shadow, whatever you want to speak to about that. Was that an ego death? Was that really, really hard? What tools continue to support you in telling the truth?
So I think that would be, if we could kind of mark that as one chapter in my life where I started having some of these kind of epiphanies, if you will, some downloads, right? So that was one. But like with anything, like it wasn't, that's no like nice, easy, straight path, you know. I think the next big chapter of like kind of getting my ass kicked by God herself was, I was probably around like 27, 28. So like big stretch of time in between. And yeah, I'm getting healthier through those years in some degrees. Like I started having a really healthy relationship with my now wife, Alyssa. You know, I'm starting to explore purpose and meaning, like I'm working in teaching, but at the same time, there's still this desperation for approval. And in that time, it was like, I need to make a shit ton of money. I need to like be famous. I need to go out and be uber successful in everything I do. And that's when I was living in Richmond. And that's when we were starting to connect with, you know, your work, yoga, like when I was doing So Far Sounds and had you out with that, like that whole era, I just look back at that and smile because I'm doing like, you know, a full-time job and like 5 or 6 crazy little part-time hustle things. And I almost lost my mind doing all that. And I think, you know, another big moment of my life is in the midst of doing this, like another crazy day in my life of like trying to do more than everyone else. Like I got down on my knees in my apartment, not very spiritual at this point in my life, but I prayed to God and I said, I'm going to lose my fucking mind if I keep living like this. That was the prayer. And it's just, you know, I can look back on that and be like, that was it. That's the seed that got me right here, you know, because shortly after that, I was reintroduced to a church community in Richmond. Like I was starting to play some music more. That got me to re-examine a lot of my contempt and resentment against the church, which still exists because there's a lot of reason for it. But it got me to like rethink a lot of these Jesus stories, which has been life-giving. It got me to go back and do some career counseling, which is how I navigated to going back to University of Texas to get a master's in social work. You know, like it got me into couples counseling. God bless, because you know, I'm coming up on 3 years married, 8 years together, and I can look back on that and like we didn't even communicate before we started couples counseling 3 years ago.
Hmm. Wow. Wow. Congratulations, I have to say, on all different levels. I love Alyssa. Y'all are such a couple. I've had the honor of hanging out with y'all and being with y'all separately and together, and yoga and music. And it's really, really been special to witness, you know, from the outside looking in, that devotion. What I see is devotion. It's like, I'm not fucking giving up. And so
Yeah.
I feel this level of devotion and effort. And you know what, you know, I'm sure people out there wanting to know about relationships, and I would love to as well. You know, that's something that I value so high, right? And I'd love to know your values too. What's most important to you right now? Because our values determine how we walk through the world. And I think a happy life is a life that is in integrity with what's most important to us. Yeah. And so what do you feel like, if you want to share just straight into it, what you learned in terms of communication styles? What tips do you have for the couples out there in
So
communication?
I want to talk on values real quick because that's an interesting thing. Like when do we ever talk about that? Like, what are your values? You know, but they're critical. That's how we orient ourselves. That's how we shape our sense of identity. That's how we connect with other people based on values. You know, like I don't go to a gym. I go to a place where people that value exercise go, right? Like values are absolutely critical. And I'm very lucky to have been done some training, have some exposure to. There's two really interesting modalities in therapy that focus intensely on values. One of them is called ACT, which is acceptance and commitment therapy. And there's also less therapeutic, but still in the clinical lexicon, if you will, of like it's a training called mindfulness and recovery. And I got to meet this guy. His name is John Bruna. He is a Tibetan monk who grew up homeless, in addiction on the streets of LA, and through the grace of God became a monk and now has developed this, mindfulness program specifically for people in addiction. And there's a lot of like 12-step overlap in it. But one of the first exercises that I got to do with this guy is talking about values. And it gives you a list of like 100 and, you pick your top 3. So doing that, I found that my top values are wonder, devotion, and humor. And that's interesting, right? But I think the critical piece is like the next step is, how do you do that? What's the action step? How do you practice wonder on a Tuesday?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
Because like if it's a value that is dormant, that just lives in us but is never acted upon, like what good is it? Do we really care about it? So that's been a really interesting exercise. So I love bringing values work into therapy, for one. But getting back to your actual question.
Wait,
like,
can I pause?
Yeah, go ahead.
Mike, how do you bring wonder in on a Tuesday? Don't leave us hanging.
I get up in the morning before the sun's out, and I put my bare feet on the grass and I look up at the sky and I just take a couple big breaths. Like, this is a cool place. Life is pretty cool.
Love that. I love that. Beautiful. So you found a way, and the way found you. I think questions are so powerful, like that prayer that you mentioned, which wasn't, necessarily a question, but a door opener, perhaps. I've been playing with, these questions of who am I, becoming, asking the stars, how do I bring, play into my life more? Or I'm open, it's like, the question is the quest. That's from my teacher, Alberto Violdo. Quest is in the question. We don't have to complete the circle. Life is a fucking mystery.
Of course.
Right? These questions that we're not just asking, we're not asking books, but we're asking the stars. And that's what a mystic is. A mystic goes to the source of knowledge. Books are great and, everything is great and all, yet a mystic goes to the night sky, goes to the morning grass, and ask those questions without needing an immediate response. Goes on a quest, right? You were led to that church community. You were following these niggles, right? And you kept saying yes to the next flow. So I had to say that, but yes, please continue.
I was following the little niggles, no doubt. And I think that's hard in the moment, because it's like, now I'm on this, like, if I'm not climbing this ladder, now I'm like driving all around here. Like, what's the point of this now? Like, the spiritual growth never feels great. I think that's a takeaway that I've like learned from this. And I think positive, like from my life, it's like the biggest periods of my life where I've grown the most or have been most influential in me being who I am today. This period sucked ass. Wasn't fun.
Yeah.
And I think that's something beautiful.
Yeah.
Because if it was fun all the time, if I was just getting what I wanted all the time, I'm not sure I'd be happy. I doubt if I would be happy.
Yes. Yes. You could call that like a deathing process. There's so many ways to look at that. And it's not about staying in that place, right? And sort of getting comfortable in that place of suffering. That's why we alchemize it and we turn it into our mission, right? You are helping people based on your journey of soul growth, right? You didn't stay there, Mike. That's so powerful. Your whole lineage is like clapping for you. You didn't stay in that. You had that fire to turn it into medicine to help others.
Sure. That's absolutely the hope. And thinking about my experience, and I think what is missing in a lot of this, like hustle, be a man, like self-help, like this like masculine, you know, cult like self-improvement culture right now. For my money, what's missing is this action of surrender. Because in my experience, just like getting on my knees with that prayer at 26 years old or so, almost every beautiful period of growth has come from the hand raising of like, I can't do this by myself.
Yes.
And there's certainly this one part of the culture which is like, double down, keep hitting it, work harder. But I think that's devoid of this connection to a resource or that's going to get you there, right? But it does require this, like, I can't do it by myself. I need help. I think the act of surrender, like even that word, we don't like it. It sounds weak. It sounds like you're waving a white flag, like you're losing, and we red-blooded Americans hate that, right? It is so countercultural, but thinking about, it's also countercultural, even though it fits so well into the culture, because like the Jesus stories are all like, even though we Americans love Jesus, like that dude understood the importance of surrender. Like, this isn't about me. Like, I'm connected to this infinite source of power and wisdom, and that's obviously not just a Jesus thing. That's all of our great spiritual teachers and the great wisdom masters.
Yeah. Wow. That is
And
so.
I think that what's healing the gospel, like the good news, is you don't have to do it by yourself. Maybe you shouldn't, you know.
Yeah. Yes. Wow. I want to talk about in a moment, the archetypes of masculine that you're deconstructing, and just a continuation of this conversation. Like, we are born into, and I don't know how much you enjoy Carl Jung's work, but in terms of archetypes and, when we need to embody the hunter and when we need to embody, it is having consciousness to direct the archetype so that they're not unconsciously running our lives. Right. But first, I want to say, I totally relate to that. And maybe that's easier for me as a feminine being. I'm not sure, maybe it is, right? I do believe we have different constructs, different blueprints, different programs. I imagine, when a woman's giving birth, like she fucking has to surrender. You know what I'm saying? So it's like perhaps our bodies,
Yeah.
the feminine body, right, is required to surrender, right?
Sure.
Mother bleeds if you bleed, that type of thing. So, but I can relate to miracles unfolding when I have opened my hands to pray. And I think that when we do that, we are literally invoking the powers of the universe. Like, in the spirit woo talk, it's like a lot of our guides and angels will fucking wait till we call them. It's like Christ the Almighty is standing right next to you. Are you invoking the power? Are you acknowledging the power? Prayer and invocation is how a shaman is, how a healer is, how a person of power, anybody, right? Because that medicine is within us. Jesus said it. You can do anything I can do and more. This lives in you. It's about invoking that power, right?
Amen.
Yeah.
It is. And in order to do that, we have to get outside of our small, wounded, I can do everything self.
Yes. Correct.
You
And
know, I I was
please.
going to say some of probably my favorite new understanding from revisiting these Jesus stories. Like I listened to this dude named Richard Rohr religiously. Sorry for that pun, but he's a Franciscan friar. He's just one of my favorite commentators on the Bible because I think he gives a whole lot of beautiful context that you might not get in the average church around here on Sunday. And one of the most interesting things, speaking about this little self, is like we have this word that we've taken from the Bible, repent, right? Like John the Baptist says, like, repent because the kingdom of heaven is near. But we've put some weird connotations, weird meanings on that word, like don't do bad stuff or don't sin. We've taken repent to be like stay in line, follow rules, but that's not the origin of that word. It's a Greek word called metanoia, which means to get outside, get around, get away from the mind, think about things differently.
Hmm.
And when we're thinking about like what this whole topic we're talking about, like the surrender aspect, like how to really bring in these greater things, like we have to get outside of this mind because this obviously is a super tool. It's a super computer. But as far as helping us live into abundance and joy, this thing is an evil machine. We have to get out of that, and that's why I think, positively in a lot of this like men's self-help movement, it is a big focus on exercise and fitness, cold baths, you know, float tanks, like sauna, because that helps us get out of here. We
Right.
have to escape this thing. We've got to get around it because that does help us get into this, this larger vibration.
Yeah. Beautiful. I totally agree. I totally agree with that. Movement alters your state. Like literally, breath alters your state. We have all of these tools to alter our state within us. And Tony Robbins will say, the first step to change is change your state, right? If you're low,
Yeah,
then you're going to be living from that, right? Get up and jump for 30 seconds. There's no rules with that,
yeah,
right? Like have a cry, go, it's not like I need to be different because I'm not enough. It's just when the time comes, it's time to elevate. It's time to elevate. And I totally agree with harnessing these tools of movement and sweat. And, when I'm in a warrior two, bet your ass I'm uncomfortable. My leg is on fire. I'm like,
yeah.
that good strength building, right? And I think that's a necessity. So I want to talk about your work too, because man, time is just a flying. This is just epic. Take us into, Mike, your work with people and how do you incorporate meditation, and maybe start with, or you decide, because I know you have your Sears men's counseling um,
Sure.
business. Yeah. Take it from there and
Yeah.
how do you help people with that?
So really the day to day for me is, you know, doing substance use counseling, addiction recovery with young dudes, 18 to 28 years old. So these are guys who are fresh out of some kind of rehab. They've got 30, 90 days under their belt of sobriety. And our facility we help them integrate. Like, okay, you did a lot of self-exploration. Now let's put your boots on the ground and let's get walking. Whether that's getting back into some kind of 2-year, 4-year trade school, whether that's getting into, some kind of part-time work, volunteering. It's like, okay, we're going to, a lot of these guys are coming from wilderness or, some very remote rehab facility, and we're plopping them right down 2 blocks away from the University of Texas with 50,000, students walking around. Like, you're in the cut. Like, it's go time. Let's figure out how to do this. So that's, and obviously I do individual counseling with these guys, run intensive outpatient groups and whatnot, do a lot of family work through that. But absolutely, we're doing meditation, because I do think that is, in order for any kind of change, we need awareness. And if we can't be aware unless we have a break, we have some pause in life, and most of these guys, certainly in the disease of addiction, like their brain doesn't like pause. They're not taking breaks, right? It's just go, 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 need, chase, right? So being able to sit across from a young dude, be like, hey, we're just going to start 5 minutes of meditation. And that's from here on out, that's going to be normal, And a lot of the work does have to be, as you can imagine, because I can't change anybody, I think it's part of the blessing of a program of Al-Anon. Like, I'm not in control. Even though I love this person and care about them, like, I'm ultimately not in charge of their journey. As much as I want to lead this horse to water, they might not drink. Right? So a lot of that work has to be focused on taking pause and just like throwing seeds. I'm a counselor, but I would call myself more of a seed thrower, right? Maybe they'll blossom into beautiful flowers. I hope so. But like, if not, maybe the seed isn't going to take this time, right? Because as you imagine, people with this disease don't always heal in the first try. How could they, right? We get a lot of guys who've been to a dozen facilities like ours. But all I can do is like offer them this, maybe an alternative way of being in the world, and that's with questions, with giving them love and support, even when they're not doing what we might call the right thing, giving them different, maybe things to read or listen to or ideas. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's just like, I show up to work and I love these people who haven't been loved in the way they've needed to. And that's why they're here with me. Beautiful. And if that's all I do, then like, it's a good day.
Right. I love that. Yeah. Yeah. And we really, we're both facilitators and practitioners in our own way. And it's like, we really lead by example. I love that quote. I don't remember who it's from, unfortunately, but maybe I'll put it in the show notes. A leader is not someone who says, follow me. A leader is someone who says, I'll go first.
I
know.
That's a good one.
It's the hierarchy. There's no freaking hierarchy. That's a bunch of BS. That's slave mentality, right? The better than worse than, the dance of the dance. And I don't want to put too much charge on that. I love you, I release you, right? Because it's easy to reject and to shame, but I don't think that does what I want it to do, right? So we're breathing and we're loving and we're not taking part in that game, right? We're watching that and how it shows up with us. But it sounds like you get to be that example, right?
Yeah, and going back to a really kind comment you made, it's like, yeah, I do. Because like, I'm working with dudes that are basically the same age that I was when I was all kinds of twisted up inside. And I think a lot of people get into these helping, caring professions to do some kind of like healing of our former younger selves.
Sure.
And obviously there can be some complicated parts of that. Like, but absolutely, like I get to go talk to 18-year-old dudes today who like are clinically depressed, who don't have any reason to get out of bed in the morning, like are having awful relationships with women, toxic, are looking desperate for validation of all kinds, looking for their dad's approval, but it's not being given. Like I get to go talk to those guys. And they're like, yeah, I like if I'd been through what you've been through, I'd probably be feeling and acting the same way. Like, that's okay. What are we gonna do?
Right. Right. And you're a safe presence because you've walked a similar path, right? There's a level of trust and safety. If you go to a marriage counselor and they've, haven't been able to sustain a healthy relationship, is there going to be a level of trust? I don't know how much
Sure.
flows about your personal path, but for me, going into addiction centers and, going in as this happy being, I start with my story. I build a bridge. And I'm
Hmm.
mindful not to go in the war stories and the horror stories type of a thing, right? It's a
Yeah.
balance with that world of recovery and things. Yet building a bridge, and I think that from pain to purpose is relatable for every single person, right? That
Hmm.
last step, or not even the last step, but that crucial step in our healing is to give back, right? And that reminds me, Mike, the story of the Holy Grail. It's like if that masculine energy within whoever is not
Hmm.
in devotion to, is not serving love, if it's serving
Right.
self, if it's love is self, but you know what I'm saying here, if it's not in service to love, it self-destructs. So having that masculine essence of go out there and get it, or whatever that that's one aspect of it, just one, right?
Hmm.
Here's point A, here's point B. It's that erect pillar, right? It is consciousness. It is that straight line of awakening, that hovering, loving awareness. Whereas, the feminine, you could say, spirals down into the body. We have both energies.
Mm.
It's the I am witness and it's the I'm fucking here now, right? It's like
Yeah.
that dance of both, but that path of the masculine evolution. And there's a book, I'm going to send it to you. You might enjoy it. And you maybe have read it. It's called He. It's two books. One is called
No.
He and one is called She. And they're very heady, short, intellectual books about mythology and story.
Cool.
Right. And it talks about the dynamic of the healing, the hero and heroine's journey, and we have both energies. So I want to ask you before we wrap up, um, let me start with one, how can people connect with you? And if there's anything else on your heart, Mike, that you want to share with us, this definitely could turn into a part 2. So we'll be in touch about that later because we're just
I'm
touching.
sure we could. I could talk to you all day.
Right.
Thinking about like, because I shared about my, what I'm doing full time right now, but what is also so important to me and critical is being able to do work with men in relationships because first and foremost, like relationships have always been the hardest single thing for me. Also, I grew up without a role model, in that or any kind of template. Like both my parents have been married 3 times. And what do I do with that? Right? Like, I don't want to do that. What the fuck are the other options? Because certainly, people who like maybe they're married, but they shouldn't be because it's not good. It's been bad for a while. So I'm I need community about how to do this. Like, I think couples counseling is important. I've enjoyed that process, but I can't do that forever, So it's like, how can I curate my own community how can I start having conversations like this with guys I know, like guys in Austin or virtually? And that is how I've come to starting this married guys support group, which is called Grumpy Bastards, because that is my default setting in a lot of ways. And when I look at like our parents' generation, our grandparents' generation, like I just see some old grumpy bastards. Like that's an archetype, right? Like this dude who can't communicate in relationships, like is always just cynical and like puts up with his wife, like tolerates her, you know. And I don't want that. I don't want anything to do with that. And I don't believe it has to be like that, you know. So next Wednesday, a week from today, I'm going to be doing my first in-person in Austin, Grumpy Bastards. And it's probably going to be 10 to 15 guys. I will offer some tips, tools, and whatnot, but it's really just a community. Because, like what we just talked about, what you said so eloquently, it's the simple act of speaking it, of being able to say what we're experiencing. Like therapy in and of itself, it's not witchcraft, it's not like any mystical thing, but it's a very beautiful, powerful healing process of being able to say what's going on. That is so transformative. And so many guys never talk about what's going on in the relationship. I know my dad didn't. I know his dad didn't. I know so many of my friends, even in our generation, don't. Because we don't know how to. It's weird. It's uncomfortable. But it's a crazy, powerful act to just say, like, dude, I'm really having a hard time with this in my relationship, or this pisses me off, or I don't know what to do here. Right. So my hope in that is like, let's just get a couple guys in a room. Let's be authentic. Let's be vulnerable. Let's practice some surrender of like, I don't know how to do this. I'm not an expert in relationships. I'm a shitty relationship expert. I think I could put that in my LinkedIn bio. I've had a lot of them, but I want to figure this out because I want to do this thing one time. And I think a lot of guys want that too. Like, I know I'm not alone in that. So being able to create community around that, like that's what's getting me out of bed on those 5 a.m. mornings. I'm like, I just want to make this. I want this for myself. I want to scratch my own itch here.
Love that.
I don't want to be a grumpy bastard.
Correct. Right. And I love the humor and the truth telling and all of that. Right. It's unshamed.
Yeah.
It's unshamed. That's beautiful, Mike. Support.
Thank you.
So big in that. How else can people work with you and find you? And we'll put them all in the show notes, but if you want to give your handles and things, and yeah, please tell us.
Totally. I mean, the obvious ones, like I'm on Instagram. I've got a website where you can find all about me, and that's just Sear, SEAR, menscounseling.com. So you can kind of find my, stuff. You can learn more about my approach to counseling. You can sign up for free consultation. I've got my own workshop, which is I'm building out a men in relationships virtual workshop series. And the first iteration of that is our relationship with ourselves. And this is a accumulation of all of whether it's psychological testing or things like the Enneagram, attachment styles. It's a nice primer for a wide array of like, how can I learn more about myself? Because that has been infinitely helpful in my relationships. Because if I don't know what's going on, if I'm not aware of what's going on, like I'm fucked. I'm not going to know when I'm triggered by something, or I'm not going to know why my partner talking about X, Y, and Z is pissing me off so much. But any bit of insight, any bit of learning about yourself you can do is invaluable. So yeah, I've designed that course. You can find that on there. your relationship with yourself. And I also do individual counseling, and I do this virtual, Grumpy Bastards meeting once a month for your listeners outside of Austin. And in the River City of Austin, Texas, we do a in-person meeting every month.
Stoked on that. Yes. Thank you for sharing. Mike, give us one tip for the masculine energy out there, please. One little tip, one piece of advice. What would it be?
That is on the spot. One piece of advice.
Simple and sweet.
It is simple because I hate asking for help. Like how I practice this, like this is such a typical man thing, and I hate it about myself. Like it's so funny. Like if I'm in Lowe's or I'm in the grocery store, I don't know where something is, I'll do everything to not ask for help. It's insane. So I've been practicing that. I think it's a beautiful, small but significant symbolic action. That's an easy way to practice this. I don't know everything. I'm going to surrender just a little bit. I think if men, certainly men in positions of influence and power, you might say, if we could start doing that, what a world it could be.
Beautiful, my friend. Thank you so much. Wow. Thank you.
I love you.
I love you too. Thank you so much for being here. And see you soon. Chat soon.
Love you, Ashley.
Love you. Hey, love, thank you so much for tuning in today for Spiritually Empowered Podcast. I hope you absolutely loved this episode. And if you did, please share it with somebody who you really feel would benefit from these teachings and from this remembrance. I hope you have an incredible day wherever you're at in your world, and I will talk to you very soon. Love you.